and get it in the mail, probably delivered by tomorrow. Scarred by struggle, transformed by hope. I read the book, I finished it, I have a million highlights on it. It's all about going into the struggle. It's all about wrestling with God. It's about wrestling with an angel. It's based on the story of Jacob. If anybody is familiar with the story of Jacob from the Old Testament. In the Christian scriptures, we call it the Old Testament. In the Jewish scriptures, it is their testament, of course. And it's the story of Jacob. And if you remember, talk about patriarchs, and happy birthday, Harold. It's really wonderful to always see you. I used to really enjoy hearing your messages when you would do the messages. You were an amazing, amazing spirit. So God bless you on your 90th birthday. Wow, amazing. So the story, talking about patriarchs, there's the story of Abraham. Everybody's familiar with the father of the Jewish people, right? Abraham, and then his son Isaac. First was Ishmael and Isaac, right? So there was Abraham, the father, Ishmael, who really represents the nation of Islam today, right? And Isaac, representing the nation of the Israelites. And then Isaac had a child, and that was Jacob. And he also had a child, Esau. So these are the brothers, Jacob and Esau. And there was a little bit of an argument, there was a little bit of a fight, there was, as in sibling rivalry. I don't know if anybody ever has any trouble with their siblings. I do. And you know what it is? It's really, when we talk about a metaphysical or mystical explanation of this, we're really talking about where we feel separate from each other. That's where the competition comes in. That's where the sibling rivalry comes in. When we think that we're separate. And so Jacob and Esau have this thing going on, this competition, just like Cain and Abel, if you remember that story, right? And so Jacob is on his way to reconcile with Esau down the road in the story. And he finds himself in the desert. He's there with his whole family. So the whole family is there with all their cattle and all their stuff. And they're wandering in the desert to meet up with Esau for a reconciliation. In the middle of this desert, all of a sudden, Jacob encounters a demon. He thinks it's a demon who starts to wrestle with him. And he's wrestling with this, who he thinks is a demon. Actually turns out to be an angel, actually turns out to be God. So he's wrestling, and Jacob won't give up, and he's fighting with this, who he thinks is this demon. He's struggling and wrestling, right? And he says to this demon, this entity, he says, "Who are you?" Now your declaration today is about communicating with spirit. How we commune with spirit, right? So he wrestles and he's wrestling and he says, "Who are you?" The angel won't answer. Who, of course, Jacob thinks it's a demon because he thinks it's a bad thing. How many times in our lives when we're wrestling with that dark night of the soul, those desert experiences, those tomb experiences, if you will, we think it's a bad thing that's coming to us. The loss of the job, the loss of the lover, the loss of the husband, the loss of the wife. No promotion. You thought you were going to get one. You didn't. The audit from the IRS. That letter in the mail. And when I just now said that sent chills down everyone's spine. As we close April 15th and the IRS.
Get behind me, Satan.
Bad news. Bad news. Bad news on our CNN app, right? The news in the world, it's constant. The struggle, the desert, the darkness, the wrestling with what we feel are demons, lower forces. So Jacob says to this angel, this demon, this spirit, he doesn't even know what it is, it's an entity, and he's wrestling with it, and he won't let go. Who are you? He says, who are you? Angel won't say. He says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Which is pretty insightful of Jacob. If he thinks that it's a bad thing, right? If he thinks it's this wrestling, this struggling is something that might be a demon or might be bad, why does he say that? Why does he say, I won't let you go until you bless me? This makes me think of my own life. This makes me think of struggles that happen in my life. 9/11 was a big one for me, a big wrestle for me. I was a lieutenant in the NYPD, and during 9/11 I was involved. I was there at Ground Zero, and I worked at Ground Zero for about a year or so, and was very immersed with the families, and then the police officers, and my cops, and boy, that was a struggle, and that was a wrestle, and I wouldn't let go. I wouldn't let go sometimes of the PTSD and the depression and the anxiety and being in that dark night of the soul, being in that tomb experience. Today is Palm Sunday, right? In the Christian tradition, we celebrate Palm Sunday, which is kind of like the beginning, the entering into Holy Week in the Christian tradition. Also, very interesting, on Good Friday, it will be the first night of Passover. So there's these three major stories that we could look at where there's this struggle, where there's this wrestling. We have Jacob wrestling with the angel, who actually turns out, as I said, I tipped it off earlier, the angel is God. The wrestling, the struggle, the desert, the Garden of Gethsemane, the crucifixion, the road to Calvary, the tomb, and ultimately the resurrection. It's all God. It's all God giving us a message. And as we wrestle with these things, and we wrestle with our depression, and we wrestle with our anxiety, and we wrestle with our bad news, or we wrestle with illness, or we wrestle with all of these things. Sometimes we're even wrestling with what we call in psychology eustress, which is positive stress. We're working on something. We're working on a PhD, we're working on a master's degree, we're working on seminary, we're working on whatever it is that we're working on, and sometimes it causes us stress. And we feel like we're struggling with it. And we're asking it. We're literally asking it as we are seekers. And we're wanting to find out what's the blessing. So we say, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. Well, so what all of that means is that the good, the bad, and the ugly are happening, and we can embrace it. Don't let go. Wrestle with it. Continue struggling with it, but you will be transformed by the blessing of it. So hang in there is the message. Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? I can't even imagine what that's like for him. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus is God, right? Well, we're all God. Jesus is an avatar. In the Hindu tradition, in Hindu practice, we believe in the incarnations, the avatars. Krishna, Ram, Buddha, Jesus, right? The Master Jesus. He's God incarnate. He's Vishnu incarnate, right? He knows the divine plan. He knows what his Father's will is, right? So here he is. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says to his friends, hang with me for a little bit. And in despair, Jesus calls out and says, let this cup pass from me. That's so much like Jacob. Wrestling, struggling with God, communing with the angel, communing with what feels like demons. The demons of chronic illness, the demons of depression, the demons of anxiety, the demons of post-traumatic stress. All these things that we know about people who struggle with this. People who are struggling with a terminal illness. People who are in the middle of a divorce. People who are feeling lonely and isolated in their addiction. People who are relapsing. People who are struggling with anger and rage. All of this feels like a demon. When in fact, we need to ask, who are you? I won't let you go until you bless me. So that's the miracle. That's the blessing, right? So here's Jesus, he's in the garden, and he's praying. Let this cup pass. And his friends can't even give him an hour. And there's betrayal, right? And there's rejection. And there's an arrest. And then there's torture. And then there's crucifixion. And on the cross, Jesus says, why have you forsaken me? Who are you? Because sometimes we don't know who God is. We think we know. God is my friend. Yes, we know that. God is my friend. We feel that. That's why we engage in song, and that's why we engage in meditation. We do this mediumship because we're connecting. We want confirmation. Who are you? Are you there? When you're in the desert, the Israelites, right? Fleeing Egypt, fleeing the Pharaoh, fleeing enslavement. They're in the desert and they're wandering. And Moses goes up to the mountain and he sees the burning bush, and what does he say? Who are you? What should I tell them when I come down? Who should I tell them you are? Who are you? Where are you? Why have you forsaken me when I'm in this struggle, man? When I'm in this struggle. Can anybody identify with anything I'm saying?
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like you're wrestling? And you're in the struggle? And you're saying, who are you? I won't let go until you bless me. And so Jesus ultimately says, into your hands I commend my spirit. He says, I surrender. I surrender to what? I become crucified of what? What is being crucified here? I won't be here next week, but I'm sure that Easter Sunday is going to be a big deal here, right? What is being crucified is what? Is our embodiment here. Our embodiment here. The Maya, the illusion, the cosmic illusion, the ignorance that this is all that is. Right? What's the enslavement of the Israelites coming out of Egypt? What's the enslavement? The enslavement is the cosmic illusion. It's thinking that this is all that matters. You see, we struggle when we lose the loved one. The message, what's the blessing? The blessing in this, the transformation in this, the resurrection in this, is knowing that this person isn't God. My father passed. It's going to be 2 years in August. I have a deeper relationship with him now, and I had a great relationship with him when he was in this embodiment, but the communication now is unbelievable. I won't let you go until you bless me. We won't let our loved ones go in the spirit world until they bless us, right? So we're in the struggle, we're wrestling, we're trying to escape Egypt, right? We're trying to escape enslavement. We're seeking freedom from the ego, is the mystical real interpretation of that, right? We're crucifying the ego. We're crucifying this embodiment. We're understanding and knowing and acknowledging that this is not all that is. That there's more than that. We're more than this body. We're more than this mind. We're more than this personality. We are the blessed self. We are that source made up of the same ingredients as God. So when I say, who are you? Jacob says to the angel, who are you? Moses says to God, who are you? Jesus says, why have you forsaken me? Who are you? Where are you? All of that is just a story. It's all story. It's a beautiful story. We commemorate it. We celebrate it. Those of us who are from Christian tradition or Jewish tradition, Islamic tradition, Hindu tradition, Buddhist tradition. It doesn't matter. There's so many parables and stories. I'm an interfaith minister, so try to get all the stories. But they're great stories. What are the stories about? They're just parables, right? They're stories that we interpret, and we look at this mystical and metaphysical interpretation of them. And what do they tell us? So what they tell us is that we can be scarred by struggle because P.S. back at the ranch with Jacob, back to our hero Jacob in the story, he becomes scarred by the struggle. How so? He hurts his hip. He hurts his hip, so he's permanently scarred. I'm permanently scarred from 9/11. And I struggle with it. So when little things happen, sometimes I go off the deep end. Sometimes I react way too large. The font becomes very big. I think I'm getting a little bit better at resetting quicker, right? Sometimes we need to let go of stuff. But I think that the message, and I'll close with this, is that we have to hang in there. That's why Jacob didn't let go until he was blessed. Because he didn't want to give up. There's a difference between surrendering to the divine will, to divine plan, surrendering and being in acceptance of what is, which Jesus was. Jesus was in total acceptance. He said, let this cup pass. But that was his humanness. Because we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but nevertheless having a human experience. And so we too forget. Where are you? Who are you? Why have you forsaken me? We forget. We're you. Jesus was you. And the mind. Right? So it's about not giving up. It's about not letting go. Hang in there with the demon. The demon's not a demon. And the demon is God, right? Hang in there. Be bold enough to ask, who are you? It's okay. We want to have communication. We want to communicate with Spirit. Who are you? And don't let me go until you bless me. And the blessing is resurrection consciousness. The blessing is freedom from Egypt. And I don't mean that in a way like to talk about Egypt in any way at all, but to say it's about freedom from enslavement. Enslavement of what? You're so attached to this world and to the people, places, and things that you become enslaved by them. So it's about freedom from that. It's about the angel of death passing over. Passing over, because that's what Pesach is, right? It's about passing over. What is being passed over? It's about, I have the courage to say, I am a friend of God. I have the courage to say that. And so what passes over me is the scars that I have, and the beauty is the transformation of the blessing. So that the Passover is the blessing. The resurrection is the blessing. And in the case of Jacob, he gets a new name, and that name is Israel.